So we started a very large institutional biobanking effort of samples from hospitalized COVID patients during sort of the first wave of infections in about March in New York last year. And this is really kind of an issue of I'd say doing high throughput cytometry under siege, so to speak, right? Because we were kind of in the midst of a shutdown, the cases were out of control, we had a lot of patients in the hospital, and we recruited this army of volunteers who were from all across the institution, people essentially who had been, furloughed from their positions, but were, still wanted to be contributing to the effort. And so lots of folks who were, helping to collect samples from these patients and bank them and process them. And we wanted to include a mass cytometry profiling as part of this effort, but this essentially was a large group of non-specialists. And, we didn't want to have complex workflows and have to train people when they also had a lot of other things to do. Plus, everything was happening under BSL-2+ conditions. And so for those of you who've worked in those conditions, you're probably aware that they're fairly uncomfortable and you kind of would prefer to not be in those conditions as much as possible. So we wanted a really streamlined workflow that minimized the amount of upstream processing that needed to be done. And so, in contrast to sort of a conventional site-off workflow highlighted here in one, the MaxPar Direct already provides one major advantage in that instead of having to worry about managing a large batch of reagents and dealing with 30 antibodies, you can now condense this down to a single addition to one antibody tube. So that helps a lot. But we wanted to simplify this even further, and we did so using this smart tube-based blood stabilization protocol. So nothing super profound, but the idea being essentially that in protocol 4, we have a workflow whereby you can take blood, add it directly to a tube, incubate the blood, add the stabilizer, and then just stick your tube at -80. And this has two advantages. One, it allows for just 2 pipetting steps up front at the very beginning. Then the stabilizer also ends up actually neutralizing, because it's a formaldehyde-based and a fairly high concentration formaldehyde-based stabilizer. So it sort of neutralizes any residual virus, and that allows the tube to just be put away. And then after the storage period, the HIMC team could now come in and process large batches of samples and add in additional antibodies and do all the extra downstream work. So this was really a kind of a very helpful workflow in allowing us to be able to run a very large number of samples kind of very quickly without sort of having kind of a big team in place to be able to do that upfront processing. I will note there's an even sort of faster workflow whereby you could just take your blood and stabilize it up front and then stain it with the MaxPar panel later. The problem with this is that there are several antibodies in the panel that are fixation sensitive, and you'll lose expression of those down the line. And this is all published work now. Actually, the paper just came out in Cytometry A 2 days ago, so you can check it out there. It's also in medRxiv, showing all of the sort of optimization that we had done to be able to kind of confirm that this workflow is a viable workflow.